I essentially got diagnosed with what's called Azoospermia. So that's essentially the absence of sperm when you ejaculate. It affects maybe like less than 1% of males. Yeah, that hit me really hard. That's when it sort of all became really real that it was my issue.
The Imperfects invites you into a very safe place. A place where we share without judgment and drink heaps of vulnerability. Grab yourself a cup. This is the Vulnerabiltea House.
Well, yes, here we are in the Vulnerabiltea House with a very, very special guest for a very, very special episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the vulnerability. We're in the Vulnerabiltea House, but we're doing a little bit differently today. We are so lucky to be joined by Reece Conca today. Reece Conca is AFL footballer, former AFL footballer, who was drafted in 2011.
2010 draft.
Yeah, started playing in 2011 at the Richmond Football Club. Won premierships and
I didn't win any premierships. So,
good start.
That's a dagger. That's a huge dagger. That's all right. I'd get that a lot. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I was there at the time.
I was wondering how I got that wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You're so good, though. You should have been playing.
Google.
Hughes, he likes to guess the bios. He's done well so far.
Then went to Freo to play for the Fremantle Football Club. And has
Where you won a Brownlow?
I think 0 Brownlow votes there.
I just assumed you did. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Honestly, we're good. We're being vulnerable here.
Well, so I've got the premierships a bit wrong, but here's something I know I've got right. You love cuddling?
Yep. A big cuddler. Yeah.
Cuddling is in like hugging or cuddling is in like intimate cuddling?
Both. No, both. Probably more publicly like a hug.
You prefer publicly cuddling?
I was known for, throwing a few cuddles around out on the field.
Okay, great.
yeah.
What's the difference between a cuddle and a hug?
That's exactly my question.
I don't think there is.
If I was to distinguish the two, I'd say a cuddle's probably like a bit longer and maybe a bit cozier.
Yeah, I agree.
Than a hug.
Yeah.
Potentially. Like you would hug, say, your mum when you meet her.
Yeah.
As opposed to like a full-blown cuddle that prolongs for
more
than just like a greeting, hi mum, how are you?
A cuddle feels more intimate.
Yeah.
Where a hug's like, "Day mate," big hug.
No, this is the thing. I believe you like cuddling your teammates a lot.
When I played, I was known for celebrating goals.
Or just a
Probably
training.
over the top. Yeah, training. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So
Because after like it was a really big goal, didn't you like get on the ground and spoon one of the players? I feel like I remember that.
So it's really exciting to have you here because we said just at the top of the interview that this is a little bit different than usual. Usually the guest will come in here and they'll pick a card almost at random and they'll pick 3 cards and then they choose a card to answer. We've actually sent you the cards in advance and you've had a look and you've actually chosen one in advance, which we're very grateful for because there's something that you'd like to talk about, and knowing vaguely what it is, we just think it's such an important topic.
The other way we could have done it is just like you keep like picking cards until it hit the one that we wanted you to hit. Should have taken too long.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think either way would have worked.
Sorry, before we get into the cards, I just want to say very quick. So you're now at the Melbourne Football Club
Go Days.
Go Days.
As a runner, is that right? You're the runner?
So I'm runner. That's kind of like a side of my job. So I'm actually the player development manager.
Yes, right. Okay.
So slash kind of welfare.
Yeah.
So I essentially look after all the guys off-field development. Which is really cool. It's a role I always wanted to get into post-footy.
Without going into details, when did you start doing that role?
So I finished up at Freo end of 21 and then was fortunate enough to sort of roll straight into this role not long after. Yeah, it's an interesting role. There's so much to it. Primarily it's for their off-field development. So, career development, setting them up for life after footy, whether it's education or work experience or whatever it is, that's really the main part. And then I work really closely with our psych on, the mental health wellbeing side. I've got a counselling diploma, so not quite to the psych level, but I've got enough understanding to help them with that aspect. And there's a whole range of other things, family engagement, community involvement. So helping these guys engage with the community and do volunteer work. And there's a lot to it, but absolutely love it.
It is, in all seriousness, it is such an important role. Especially, I look at having been at many clubs, the one that I think is really important. I mean, there's so many aspects of the role that's so important, but when you get young men turning up to the club age 18 who have never lived away from home, and all of a sudden you can have players who are from interstate, like yourself coming from Perth across to Melbourne, it is a huge transition to make. So to have someone like you to, I was going to say hold their hand, but for you, if you let me cuddle them, is just, it's so important.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Because it would be quite if you're with a club for a long time, or even just playing football for a long time in multiple clubs, when it comes to the point where you're probably not choosing to stop, you have to stop playing. That would be a very tough transition, I imagine. Maybe even tougher than going into the system at the start, but having to leave and then start a whole new life post-football. I feel like that would be very difficult.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's, for a professional athlete, probably the hardest part of their professional career, really. I know it was definitely for me personally, and I had a lot of struggles through my footy career with, homesickness early on, injury, the whole lot, suspension, missing out on premierships, that sort of sticks around for a while. So I've had to sort of work through that as well. And I think that transition post-career is so hard because you don't really know any different as an 18-year-old. You're just in this footy environment. And admittedly, that environment is not really like the real world. It's it is a bit of a bubble. As an athlete, you kind of get looked after excessively. A lot of guys don't really think about life after footy, so they're not actually qualified for anything when they finish, and they kind of just stumble into nothing. And you kind of caught picking up the pieces a little bit. But also the piece around like confidentiality, like I emphasize that to the guys more than anything.
Yeah, so they're worried if they say I'm struggling mentally, it's going to hit them at the selection table, basically.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I've been through that boat, and I tell the guys, whenever I catch up with them, whether it's individually or, I'm up in front of the group, it's like confidentiality is number one to me. Like I value it more than anything else. Like I've lived what you're living. Your mental health and where you're at as a person is absolute priority for me, and the footy stuff, let the coaches look after.
Okay, well, we have got you in here.
Card.
Yeah, we've got you in here to draw a card that you already know what it is. So let's just give you do we just give him the card?
It's ready for you.
That's it there? Okay, so here's the card.
All right, so when did your life get turned upside down and how did things change?
Okay.
Big,
yeah, it's a
big
huge question. It's a huge question. We are very grateful that you have chosen that one.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's funny because everything we just spoke about with the footy and the transitioning was actually at the same time. So to go to the start, my partner and I, Annabelle, had been trying to conceive naturally, to have kids for quite some time. I think it was about 10, 11 months at that point. And at this point, I'm kind of realising my footy career is probably over. Like I'm not getting played in the ones. I'm out of contract.
And have they spoken to you about that, or is it just a sense that you got?
It was a bit of a sense. I sort of asked for a bit of clarity from Fremantle at the time, and footy clubs all operate in different ways. So that's just sort of how it planned out without definitively knowing I was done. Sort of saw the writing on the wall. And then, Belle and I had been trying naturally, and then we're kind of like, all right, let's go to the doctor. Let's just get some checks, see what's going on. So I remember we went to the GP for the first time, and it was just all very focused on Annabelle. So she's asking Annabelle all these questions. All right, we'll get these tests for you. I recommend some acupuncture, these vitamins. And she kind of threw a couple of questions my way. I was like, you healthy? Do you drink much? Smoke? Drugs? No, I'm healthy as ever. I'm a professional athlete. Like,
congrats on the premierships.
Yeah. She didn't miss that quite as much as you. So we've done all that. All right, great. So now we've kind of got potentially some solutions. Let's get going on this. So Belle did all the acupuncture, the vitamins. We did all that for a few more months and still just wasn't happening. So by this point, I'd just been delisted by Fremantle. So I'm feeling not in a great space, really struggling anyway. But Belle's purpose in life is to have kids, right? She's wanted it more than anything. And I was kind of quite big on, I'll have kids when I'm finished my career. I'm not going to be that old. Like, it was more of an afterthought to me. Like, I love kids. I've always wanted to have kids, but I wasn't in a super rush. And then, it was sort of back into 2020, and I was like, there's never a great time to have kids. Let's just do it. If anything, it's actually great that I'm still earning decent money. Lifestyle's great, playing footy. So Belle, after a couple of months of then doing all that, Belle was sitting down. Belle's like, well, should you maybe get your semen tested? Like, go get a semen analysis. And I'm like, what? No. Like, why? Like, why would I do that? Like, is that even a thing? And it was just kind of like, but Belle was very adamant on it. And Belle's one of those people, she's very proactive, really needs to have all the information. So she's just relentlessly Googling what could be going wrong, what can we do? So I was like, all right, I'll do this. Let's, if it's what you want and you think it'll help. And then I put it off for weeks, like a couple of weeks. And it was probably only on reflection now that I'm in a much better space and I can reflect a lot clearer back through the journey now, which is great. I just remember like this overwhelming sense of like embarrassment and shame attached to the fact that it's like, oh, I need to get this semen analysis. Like,
that it could be you.
Yeah, it could be me. Is there something wrong? If there is something wrong, like, like what do we do with that? Like, that's so foreign, so new, and so kind of unknown. Like, so I was still at Fremantle. So like my doctor is the club GP and he's the loveliest bloke ever. I would have walked past his office 100 times over this 2-week period and just couldn't bring myself to go ask him just to literally get a reference to get a semen analysis. And I'd always go home and Belle would be like, did you ask him? Did you get it done? Like, no, I was too busy. Or like make up some excuse like, oh, he wasn't in today or...
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, all right, I finally bit the bullet, walked in, and it was just like the easiest 1-minute conversation ever. It's like I went in, I was like, hey, Jono, like, do you mind if I just get a reference off you? Belle and I, we're just starting to try conceive, but we just want to be on the front foot and get a semen analysis. And he's like, yeah, man, absolutely, that's fine. Wrote it up, off I went. It was like, so I look back at that moment, I'm like, wow, like that's probably the first time that I realized it, or like I realize now that it was actually affecting me so much. And this is before I even know anything. Like, still all very like, we're just on track. Like, we're just trying to conceive naturally. It's just taking a bit longer.
And had you spoken to any like friends or anything about the fact that you're going to get the analysis, or is this completely kept to yourself?
Yeah, no, this is all completely just between Belle and I. And it was like that for quite some time. I really struggled with the idea of there really being anything wrong or it being my fault. And if there is, then, what do we do with that?
So you'd been trying for about a year when you went into the club doctor?
Yep.
Is that right?
Probably, around a year, just over a year.
Did you, I don't know if it was just in the retelling of the story then or that you changed it, but I was really struck by the fact that you said to him, we're just starting and I just want to be on the front foot, because it feels like it's sort of we're 12 months in and things aren't going well.
Yeah.
Was it that the way you framed it with the doctor?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's the way I was and probably still am now, is that I kind of try and like minimize the issue to make it sit better with me. Whereas I've definitely got loads better with that sense of it. It's like just being more vulnerable and honest and open with what you're actually dealing with has been
great use of loads.
That's brilliant.
Sorry, that is not the tone I'm going to take.
No, we needed that. No, that's fine. It's encouraged, don't worry. I'm very comfortable speaking about this topic now. So, so basically that all happened. And then I eventually got the semen analysis done and we got the results. We're actually on just a little getaway because I was still in this period of not really knowing what I'm going to do next. So we got away for a few days, got the results back, and it just came with, I don't know what the exact wording was, like extremely low sperm count, which is essentially 0 to 1 million. You sit in that category. So the average male would have tens and tens of millions of sperm that just regenerates by the hour. Anyway.
And so does that, and this is a serious question, but is that a case of like how much is left, or is it just like the amount that's regenerated is low? Yeah,
so that's how much was present in that semen analysis.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think in some male cases, there is eventually a point where they do run out. But these are all the questions that Belle and I, once we got those results, it's like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Because the club doctor, he's not a fertility specialist. So he rang me, I got the email as well, and he rang me sort of to just chat through it. He's like, mate, you should probably get this checked further. I don't know enough about it, but source out a fertility specialist and go from there.
Did it seem strange to you when you went with Bella to the other GP, that you weren't getting many questions at the time, or were you kind of happy about that because you didn't want the spotlight to be on you, or was it odd?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's one of those things that I've now reflected back on, and I've gone, well, that seems kind of like not the right process. Like it should be. Now that I've learned so much about this, one of the stats that would be shocking to most is that it's around 40% of fertility journeys are male factor related, which is mind blowing.
Yeah.
If before I'd gone through this, if someone said that, I would have thought it was almost zero. It was just like you hear IVF and you just assume it's the female.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's that experience looking back now is like, well, I think that potentially has to change. I don't know if every GP is like that, but there definitely needs to be more focus on the potential of it being male factor related.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we got those results, but then not long after that, we decided to move back to Victoria. Belle's from Geelong, so a kind of like future plan at some point was to live down there. And
can I just ask, when you first got that, and when you spoke to the club doctor, and he was like, oh, you should speak to someone like an expert about this a little bit more. How did you feel about that, like at that point?
Yeah, I think it was, probably like instant alarm bells. I think the biggest struggle with it all is it's just such an unknown. Like there's just no real answers. Like you don't have any pre-educated information about male infertility.
No.
So for him to go, I think you should go to like a fertility specialist. It's kind of like, oh, okay, what even is that? Like, what are they going to do? There's a lot of uncertainty around it. And then I'm feeling really anxious at that point.
Yeah.
I'm also really aware. So we've been trying for 4 years now, and I'll talk through that journey. But I've been seeing a psych weekly, at worst fortnightly, for years and years now. And she's brilliant. So I'm in a lot better place now in terms of like how I can emotionally regulate and be aware of how I'm feeling. So a lot of the early parts of this journey, I kind of have to reflect back on it rather than like really being aware on how it was affecting me. And it's really cool that I'm in that place now. But it's a lot of those questions about like how you're feeling at that point. It's like, I probably wasn't in the right space to actually fully acknowledge that.
So did you start seeing the psych off the back of this, or was it something like you were already seeing one and it sort of coincided?
No, so I'd been seeing one in Perth sort of on and off, like the back end of my career, just around a bit of, support around transition and, just what I was going to do and where I was going to be and just that struggle. And then we moved back to Melbourne and I sourced one closer to home. So I've been seeing her for probably 2.5 years now. She's been amazing. That side's been incredible because the emotional trauma that comes with this journey is just, you would never even think of how much it would affect you. Basically we came and saw a fertility specialist eventually in Melbourne.
A fertility specialist, what do they do? Like, other than the obvious, but like, what is the actual process of seeing one? Like, are you in an office? Is it like a doctor's office?
It's like a doctor's office. Initially they kind of just get all the tests done. So I did another semen analysis, you get all these blood tests done, not just like your normal blood tests, but testosterone, FSH levels, all these extra stuff. And that's essentially what came back for me. So I got another semen analysis, and that second result came back completely zero. So that was the one that probably hit the hardest, and that was a few months down the track. And I remember that moment, like I got it as I was driving home from work, which was probably good timing. But I remember just getting home and just completely breaking down. Even now, just feeling a bit of that come back now. It's and just would have cried all night. Just with Belle at home. It was just like, that was probably like the real, like in terms of the getting my life flipped upside down. I feel like everything up to that point was really tough and it was challenging, but that was the moment where it's like, wow, this is real. Yeah, that hit me really hard.
Yeah.
That's when it sort of all became really real that it was my issue.
And you're crying because you're thinking, I won't be able to have kids, or because you're thinking there's going to be a very tough road ahead of us to try to get pregnant, or?
Yeah, no, at that moment it's like, yeah, I'm not having kids. Because at this point we still don't have a lot of information and clarity around it. That's kind of like what's next. But I think at that point you just think worst case scenario. Got 0 sperm on this analysis. And then that was kind of the one where I thought maybe I was in that boat where it's like, maybe I've run out. Shit. In that period, I've now gone from however many to none, and we've missed our chance.
Is it too simplistic and crass of me to think that the first thing you would think of is all the times you've wasted it? Like, oh God, when I was 16, that was stupid. I didn't need to. I should have been a bit more reluctant.
I don't think so.
Doesn't work like that, no.
I'm almost certain that thought didn't cross my mind until this point, and now it's like, well, shit, what have I done?
No, it didn't cross my mind. I was just saying it as a joke. It was like, definitely, I would never think that. Never think that.
No, definitely not. But anyway, from that, we changed fertility specialists. Just weren't really feeling comfortable with who we were with, and we felt like it was dragging on a little bit. There were a lot of tests, and we're kind of like, oh, okay, so we got recommended somebody else. And like we just dove straight in. They were a specialist that could actually do both sides of the fertility process, so the male and the female. So at that point, with the 0 sperm analysis, I essentially got diagnosed with what's called Azoospermia. So that's essentially the absence of sperm when you ejaculate. So it affects maybe like less than 1% of males. Right. So you hear that and you're like, well, okay.
It just must feel so unfair because if it's such a low percentage and like you said, you and Belle wanted kids so much, it's heartbreaking.
Definitely. Yeah, that was one of the harder things to deal with because I'm kind of naturally one of those very positive people, and I've always just kind of been like, all right, that's what it is. Let's soldier on. Let's push on. Let's not dwell on that. Like no one really knows any of this at this point. It's just between Belle and I. So I'm still kind of being myself, but kind of battling with this in the background.
So there's no one else you'd told at this point?
So at this point, no one else knew. Belle had so once we got the 0 sperm analysis back, Belle told her family straight away, just her immediate parents and siblings. And then I told my family not long after that as well.
Okay.
Before you go on, can I delve a bit deeper into what Hughes asked before? I imagine a level of feeling guilt that I'd let my partner down, but also maybe a fear of failing at what is kind of like in a sort of masculine way. Did any of those thoughts layer in there? Or was it something else that was making you so emotional?
No, 100%. And I'm sure I would have touched on that at some point because they're the big ticket emotions that have just absolutely been with me through the whole journey. The guilt one more than anything, like that just latches onto you like no other emotion, I reckon. It's probably the one that I've had to work through the most, only because it's affecting somebody else and Annabelle, the person you love more than anyone else in the world. And especially around this whole sense of purpose, right? Like I've done a lot of work on my purpose and my values in life. And for Belle, it's like, that's her purpose, is to have kids and to be a mother. So it's so much more than just like the kids. It's like, this is what Belle's life, like this is what she wants her life to literally revolve around. And you're that one responsible for taking that away from her. So yeah, there's been a lot of guilt that I've had to work through, definitely. That sense of like it being really unfair has been another one. And then, there's a lot of around that stuff around masculinity. I remember even just getting one of the first blood test results back around like having like really low testosterone. And you're like, oh shit, like, what does that mean? Like I'm a male and like I want to be masculine and I've been a professional athlete for so long. I've bashed blokes out on the ground and tackled and done all this stuff, but I've got low level of testosterone. Like, how does that work? So there's been a lot of that I've had to wrestle with and worked through and unpacked. And I think that's the beauty of, getting the professional health, like my psych, just being able to teach me how to just sit really curiously with the emotions and feelings and trying to get a bit of an understanding of it. And when it comes up, like what is the feeling in my body that I need to sit with and get to, rather than just bottling it up and getting the first distraction that, whether it's your phone or PlayStation or whatever it is for each person. It's actually like just sitting in that uncomfortable feeling, working through it, so it doesn't actually affect you as much as what you want it to.
I didn't expect to ask this question, but what do you mean by work through it?
Just in terms of, it's more just like so that you're not just completely ignoring it. So it's like actually working through that emotion. It's like, all right, I'm human. Like I'm allowed to feel this emotion. It's completely valid. And then just being open with it and talking through it. Like this is why I'm experiencing it. And then the more you talk about it, the more you can sort of understand why you're feeling that way. And so for the guilt stuff, it was around the purpose and working through the idea that it's not actually my fault. Like, yes, the issue lies with me, but I didn't do this on purpose. Sort of stuff. So it's all that. So working through that's been, like really important for me and for Belle as well, because then it affects the way that I communicate with Belle. Because that was probably one thing we struggled with early is we're both the two people in this together, but we're both struggling. So how do we communicate our struggles without sort of butting heads or feeling like one person's kind of dominating more or taking more of the energy of the other? And so that's been really important. And I'm still not perfect at that, definitely. I sort of, I was probably a 1 out of 10 when I started seeing my psych, and now I'm probably a 4 or 5 out of 10. And there's still so much growth in that area. But I think because I've had something so significant happen to me, it's a bit more prevalent, and there's a lot of strong emotions that I can work through.
So before we get on to what happens next, I'm interested in the relationship at this point. I feel like when something like this happens, it can either strengthen or weaken the relationship. Where did it sit for you guys? Did this bring you closer together?
I'd say so, definitely. In terms of, the way that we communicate with each other, definitely. I mean, we have our moments where it feels the polar opposite, where you feel very distant and, you might go at each other and, there's, a whole heap of emotions that come up pretty regularly. But I feel like we've become a lot better at dealing with them quicker and not letting them really stew and affecting us for longer periods. Belle and I have kind of got this rule where, like, we'll never go to sleep angry at each other. And we'll also never bring too much heavy emotion into bed. So it's kind of like, all right, if we do have anything that we kind of need to chat about, or if you're feeling a certain way, like let's try to talk about it over a cup of tea or at dinner or whatever it is. Because, once you're emotionally unregulated in bed, it's very hard to come back from. So, that's kind of their little things that we've kind of, spoken and worked through. But, I think it's definitely strengthened our relationship, because there's also that element early on for me where it's like, well, is Belle going to stay with me? Like, because... I mean, we'd been together for quite some time when we first got the news, but, like we were still quite young. Like Belle was probably 26 at the time and I was 28. So we're still very young. So it's like, that's again a thought that I'm wrestling with. It's like, well, what if Belle just pulls the pin and goes, this is too hard. I'm out of here.
How long had you been together for at that point?
So we'd been together for probably 3 years. So Belle had moved from Melbourne to Perth with me once I got traded to Freo. So we're living together. But it was about 3 years by then.
I can imagine that fear though, like because I think it's pretty common to have those worries. If you're, when you're with someone that you like feel truly lucky to be with, there is always a bit of a, maybe not always, but there can be a little voice in the back of your head going like, God, I'm pretty lucky to be in this situation. She could probably find someone just as good, if not, probably not. Probably better, and so when you go into something like, I can totally imagine having that would be I can imagine having that anxiety as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wonder if, as far as like chronologically, if we could maybe go back to where we sort of left off.
No, we can do that.
That would be, I think. For sure. I'm so fascinated to hear the process.
Definitely. So we got to the new fertility specialist, and. So we're like, all right, what do we need to do here? So at this point, Belle doesn't have to do anything. It's all on my side. But the specialist we went to So my testosterone levels were low, a few other things were a bit low. So to boost them up, he suggested doing some hormone injections, which is like the equivalent to what women would use for their IVF preparation. So I was taking 2 different injections every second night, like alternatively for about 6 or 7 months. So yeah, to help boost testosterone.
Like self-administered?
So self-administered. So I still remember the first time doing it. It took me hours to like actually want to do it.
And where is it, into your stomach?
So you do it into your stomach. And yeah, I sort of was like, oh my gosh, like this is so weird. So anyway, so you get used to it after a little bit, like the injecting part of it.
Does it hurt a lot?
Not really. No, it's just like getting a normal injection, like a blood test one, but probably slightly less than that. Because you go like right into like you just grab the fattiest bit you can and.
Which would be a struggle for you to find.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. I mean, this was a couple of years ago. Okay. But yeah, so I did that for probably 6 or 7 months. I had to do these injections and they're horrible. Like, because they're hormonal injections, it's like I'm feeling nauseous all the time, irritable, mood swings. Like, and for me, that's so foreign. Like, I feel like I'm a relatively calm level person. So to be feeling all this stuff's like really strange.
Were you able to associate the mood swings linked to this, or was it a bit confusing at first?
It was little bit confusing at first, only for a little bit, because then we sort of did a bit of research and the specialist sort of said like this is, you know, a potential side effect of it. So, but it probably didn't realize like how significant it would affect me. So the flip side of this, like I've just started my new job. And this role, like we spoke about, is like I'm fully engaged with so many people. Like I'm the person that people are coming to talk about their issues. And I've kind of got this one going on and I'm feeling pretty crappy most days for an extended period of time. And I still haven't told anyone about what I'm going through other than our immediate families. I eventually told the club doc at Melbourne, they've got 2 doctors, who were brilliant. So some days I'd rock up to work feeling absolutely horrible and just go ask, you know, can I have like one of those anti-nausea wafers just to sort of help settle it? And there were a couple of days where I just had to go home. I just like so I told Alan Richardson, our GM at footy as well, just so he was aware of it. And the club were brilliant. They were really supportive. He just sort of said, if anything you need, just go for it, which is great. So I just stopped coming to work for like 3 months. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, anytime I needed to go get tests or if I was feeling really average, go home. He was really supportive of that, which was really helpful. But yeah, basically did all these injections, got my levels up, like kind of where they thought they needed to be. And then that was in preparation for an operation, which is called a microteasy, where they essentially like operate on your testes to try and manually find sperm.
Whoa, like literally going in to try and find them. They could be hiding somewhere.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So yeah, fascinating. And
wow.
So yeah, did all the prep for that, had that operation.
Oh, I mean, having struggled with a vasectomy, that must be a really uncomfortable procedure to go through.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the physical element of it was like really tough. So the first, like you walk out later that day, but it's really uncomfortable for the first few days. Like you're barely moving, sort of house at home, just couch to bed.
And I'm just sorry, I can't. Just comparing you to me. So you had that done and you walked out. I had the vasectomy done and I got wheelchaired out. Anyway,
no, that's fine. The wheelchair would have been nice, but so that was. I mean, I took a week and a bit off work, which, like I said, the club were great with.
Yeah.
Just to sort of rest at home, because there's even just like emotionally, there's, you know, is this going to work? And so there's a lot of, you know, waiting around.
And I imagine at this point you're just like, whatever it takes. Is it just sort of a whatever it takes mentality?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely. At this point, it's just like, we're in.
Yeah.
Whatever we need to do, definitely. So yeah, and the operation, like I was petrified going into that because it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is pretty invasive, and you know, what if something goes wrong, or you know, what if we don't get any? Like, there's so many things, and so we got the results back, and they were really positive. So at the time we thought they were positive. So they found some sperm, and so what they did with Belle is she had her egg collection the day after my operation, and the ones that they found, they just fertilized her eggs straight away. So just to sort of like the natural, because the other option is to freeze them. So we did that naturally, and from that we got 9 embryos. So essentially, like when you fertilize the egg with the sperm, you form an embryo. So this is all the cool stuff I've learned over the journey. And so we got 9 embryos, and they froze them all. So they're like, so it's like at that point you're like, wow, we've got 9 chances of falling pregnant, which is kind of like, well, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like with that, you're like, we're kind of home here. Like, how good's that?
We're going to have 9 babies.
We could have 9 babies. They're all just sitting there, right? But in saying that, like, there's also the high chance they don't work, and that's what we eventually figured out. So, so we had the 9 embryos. We did the first one the following month, and so they essentially just transfer the embryo into Annabelle, and then just hope that it sticks and hope that it grows, and Belle falls pregnant. That's kind of the process. So did the first one, didn't work. Second one didn't work. And so we're kind of riding this roller coaster. It's like you kind of get a bit excited about, all right, we're doing a transfer this day. Belle does her, the stuff she needs to do for the IVF, the trigger, and then kind of wait for a week to see if it sticks. And this one's failed. So you kind of come crashing back down again. So yeah, like just the emotions you feel there, you kind of go from like sort of a high to low and feeling really disappointed, and then you get this sort of anticipation that the next one's going to work. And we did 5 transfers month after month, so we went through 5 failed months.
And is that exhausting for Belle?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like what I've experienced, Belle at this point it's like she's kind of now burdening. Yeah, so she's doing the injections leading up to the transfer. So she's kind of taken on that burden now of the full process of doing the transfers. She's the one doing the injections. The actual transfer itself isn't really too physically demanding, but yeah, the injections are no good. Like she really struggled with them as well. I'm trying to encourage men to be a little bit more proactive with the idea of falling pregnant and putting the things in place for that. Because I feel like it's not a thought, especially for the male. I feel like we don't put anywhere near the time and energy into it than what females do. And look, I'm one of the unfortunate less than 1% of males that this has happened to, but there's also 40% of males that have male factor related issues. And a lot of that is just poor sperm health. But it's something that you would never think about, right? Like you just try to conceive naturally, but that is something that could hinder your journey, not to the level of that Belle and I, but it could put you back a significant amount of time. It could then actually cause you to need to do IVF.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like, all right, we're going to try to start conceiving, it's like, I'm going to get healthy. So I've got really, really healthy sperm, and it's going to really increase the chances of us falling pregnant, and you're going to save a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of trauma.
Yeah, there's something that hadn't really occurred to me until then, that there's an evolution of like men traditionally not thinking about pregnancy really at all, to then an evolution to where it's like giving a lot of respect to what women go through in pregnancy. But there's an element to that I think absolves responsibility as well. Like where you're like, men will be like, well, I'm not, she's doing all the work, like, and respecting I think it comes from a certain intention of respecting the amount of the enormity of what it is for a woman to be pregnant. But there's definitely a way in which you therefore stand back and think, I don't have to take on any of the mental load here, basically, of what it is to fall pregnant. And it's such an incredibly pertinent point I think you bring up, that like it's 2 of you doing it together, and it's an equal responsibility.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I mean, we've lived that more than most will need to in terms of that process of falling pregnant. But yeah, even if you are fortunate enough to fall pregnant quite quickly and naturally, it's like, yeah, just let's be really present. Let's be really proactive, conscious of how each other are feeling through that journey. So yeah, I think it's really important.
So you've had 5 failed attempts.
Yeah. So we used, so you can actually in a transfer put more than 1 embryo in. So our last one, we put 2 embryos in, which kind of can increase the likelihood of one sticking. But so that one failed as well. And so at that point, we'd used 6. We only had 3 left. And so then this whole new part of the journey comes in. It's like, all right, well, are we just going to soldier on and use the next 3 and then run out and then what do we do? Or are these 3 even going to work? Like the other, because they're all graded. All the embryos are graded like by quality, and you use the highest quality one first. So the 3 we've got left are they're like the duds. They're like the runts of the
God,
litter.
it is like a draft.
Yeah, literally. So you just got the last 3. They're sitting on the bench. It's like, do we call them onto the ground or?
Fine, I'll take Greg.
So and again, this is Belle because like admittedly Belle's been a lot more proactive and she's really dived into researching and sits on her computer and that's kind of her way of dealing with things. I'm probably not quite to that level. But we sort of sat down. She's like, well, do we get another opinion? Do we go somewhere else and see if there's another way of doing it? And she'd been recommended a different specialist who's really highly regarded in Australia. And at this point, to your point, right, it's like, yeah, we're going to do everything we can. So if we just sort of, just knuckle these last 3 out and they don't work, and then again, we've wasted another 3 months. The transfers are also really expensive. Like this is another part of the costs of the IVF stuff's like it's a lot.
How much is it per transfer?
So transfers, I think you do get a bit back, but they're a few $1,000s like per transfer. But then you got to add in like all the drugs, the appointments, the blood tests, all that, and then add on all of my stuff. Like that's just the transfer IVF stuff. Like all the drugs I was taking, again, the semen analysis tests.
The surgeries, yeah.
The surgeries. We've spent a lot of money through this journey and we wouldn't change anything. Like we're obviously going to do everything we can. So at this point we're like, all right, well, let's just stop,
but
reassess.
It's worth mentioning because it's like, for some people, it's not an option.
Yeah.
Because of cost prohibitive.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that's one thing Belle and I have spoken about a lot and I've had people hit me up on social media, guys message and be like, oh, like, thank you so much, like, for speaking out and it's helped us so much, but we're actually not in a position to do the microteasy surgery. So we're hoping we can do it soon. But so you read that and you're like, whoa, gosh, like, we feel very grateful that we're actually in a position to afford to do all of the processes necessary.
So once the transfer happens, then what is the actual process of like finding out if it's like a yes or a no, like you're pregnant or not?
Yeah, it's agonizing. It's I think it's 7 around a week, maybe just over a week. Which it's an agonizingly long time to just be waiting and anticipating the results. And then you find out by a call, like one of the IVF nurses will just give you a call. And it's just a straight up, like, we're really sorry, like this one didn't work. So it's so amazing. You have this huge build up and it's like literally a 30-second phone call. Many tears off the back of them. I always make sure that I'm with Belle when we find out the news. So, I'll tell Belle if she gets a call at like 10 a.m. and she knows she's got the IVF number, like seared in her brain just to not pick up and then wait till I get home and we can get the news together just because I feel it's really important that we're there to support each other. And we've really made sure we've been together when the news is broken, but plenty of tears after that. Then, we just sort of dive into the next month. You have I think it's about 10 days before you can actually start the next process anyway. So, it probably almost takes you all those 10 days to actually kind of get over the last one and then kick into the next one. So, it's definitely a tough part of the process.
Wow. Yeah.
Can I just check in on something? Had you told any mates or any men in your life at this point?
So at this point, no. I definitely knew at some point I was going to talk to people about it. I think for me it was kind of, I wanted more answers before I would talk about stuff. Like that was kind of like how I was sort of drilled up until that point, and the complete opposite now. But at that point it's like, I don't really like the idea of talking about something that I don't necessarily know all the answers to or the uncertainty behind it. And I didn't like the idea of kind of being a burden to other people as well. It's like if I tell them this, then, I'm burdening them with my issues. And there's all these things that I was kind of wrestling with at that point.
But that wasn't the case. It wasn't a burden when you...
Not
let
at
him
all.
know.
No, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And then from then, like, it gives everyone a better understanding of what you're going through. Like, now that I've come out publicly, you know, I have people at work come up all the time. They're like, oh, mate, like, that's so amazing that you've done that. Like, we didn't have any idea you were going through that. And then they'll ask questions. Some people are more curious than others. And, you know, I can tell them about what we've gone through and gives people a bit more of a context as well. Like, one thing I struggled with at work is like these constant triggers that would keep coming up because of the fact that nobody knew. So some bloke would be like, if I had to go get a test and I'm leaving work at, you know, midday, and they're like, oh, half day's Conca. You know, like, it's just like a little passing joking comment. It's banter, but he's got no idea that I'm about to go get a semen analysis that could change my life, or, you know. So it's like, now that people have that understanding in the context of what I'm going through, the triggers aren't there as much, which is, you know, so it's so helpful. Because that was a lot of the struggle and what I worked with my psych. It's like, all right, how do I deal with these triggers? Because some of them are so triggering and it rattles me for hours and days. So I had a lot of techniques for that. So like, if I was sitting at my desk or a table with something and I got triggered, I had this technique where I'd sort of like push my feet into the ground just to sort of like shift my attention. So little things like that, whereas I don't have to use them as much now, which is, you know, which is great. So instead of it being kind of like a reactive response, it's now like a lot more like preventative and proactive. So yeah, the talking out, it's life-changing.
So I'm just trying to get where we are chronologically now. So you've done 5 months worth of unsuccess. Well, so you find someone else to go and see another specialist. You've got 3 left.
Yeah. So we've now made the decision. So we've just sourced out so I went to a urologist. So he's a specialist with male, and his expertise is with the fertility side of it. So we went and saw him, and I'll never forget the first appointment we had with him, because we went in and we kind of shared everything of the journey at that point. We'd got all of our medical records and tests from our previous specialist, and he's gone through them all, and we're sitting down, and he kind of explained to us that, in short, everything we'd kind of done was probably, well, there's no right or wrong, but what I'd done wasn't actually a proven, like, effective process.
Oh God.
So it was like, so like, because this, like, male fertility, right, there's so many grey areas, there's a lot of unknown, like, they need to be doing a bit more research and study behind it. But at that point, it's like, that is not even a proven way of going about it. It's like,
which was news to you.
News to us.
Jeez.
Like, so, and I remember leaving that appointment and I've like in a rage. Like I don't feel angry a whole heap. But I remember driving home. So Belle ended up going back to work. And at this point, Belle's actually like really excited because she's like, all right, we've got another chance. We're going to see somebody else. And he was like, on the flip side of that appointment, he was really hopeful. He's like, your levels are all where they need to be. I'm pretty confident when I get in there and do my operation, we'll find some. And so we came out of it with like a bit of hope. But at that point, like, I'm internally like blowing up. Like I am so angry.
But so understandable and so fair.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So Belle went back to work and I drove home to Geelong. So I had a good hour drive from the appointment home.
Just screaming the whole time.
Yeah. Even just reliving it now, like I've never felt so angry. Just like this sense of like disgust and like the feeling of unfair popping up again. And yeah, that drive home will just stick with me forever, I reckon, just how I felt. And one thing that my psych and I have worked through is if I do start feeling that way, just make a call, like whether I call Annabelle or call mum or someone, just to kind of like break the cycle and talk through it. And I just couldn't bring myself to call anyone. I was just like, I was swimming in it. And also worried that like, I don't want to burst Annabelle's bubble. I didn't probably ever express to Belle, definitely not like in the recent time after that, like how that affected me so much. Yeah, so that happened. And then it was all a very quick turnaround. So we decided to just leave the 3 embryos we had. So they're still frozen, sitting on the bench. And our new urologist, I had the operation again, it's about 8 weeks ago.
The micro-teasy.
So I had a second micro-teasy, but he did it. So I did it again.
Oh my God.
So second operation now. So I didn't have to do any of the injections leading up to this operation. Like I said, that was our new specialist kind of said like that isn't the way I do it, which was great. Like that was a huge relief.
Yeah.
But also infuriating that you went through that and there was no real evidence that that's something you needed to do.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember just like in that drive home, just thinking like we've just gone through like I think it's a year and a bit with this specialist doing these injections, wasting thousands of dollars, having this operation that we thought worked, but I don't know. We did find some definitely. The other difference between the specialist and the surgery is the first one froze our embryos at day 3, whereas this process. So I had my microtesia again about 8 weeks ago, and it was successful.
So literally 8 weeks ago from
8
today.
weeks ago from today.
Right.
Yep. And it was successful again, and I say that conscious that it might not be successful, but he managed to find some sperm and a lot more than from the first one. So enough that I now have 4 frozen vials of sperm that we can use in the future. So I'll never have to have the operation again, which is a huge relief.
Amazing.
And then from that surgery, Belle, again, same process, did her egg collection. Belle she has eggs coming out of everywhere, which is a blessing because that is for a lot of.
Hope not everywhere.
For a lot, yeah.
We got an issue, Belle. There's eggs coming out everywhere.
She has an abundance of eggs.
Yeah.
And that's the flip side. So for females going through IVF struggles, a lot of them don't have eggs, which is really sad. So we're very fortunate that Belle's side of stuff's very healthy and very good. So I think she got 30-something eggs. I got plenty of sperm, so we did the same thing where the transfer, and we fertilized her eggs. So we got 5 embryos this time from this operation, but they were frozen at day 5 instead of day 3. So that essentially just means that they're more mature. So they're it's almost like quality over quantity, essentially. Because if you freeze them at day 3, you're probably going to have more there, but they haven't survived to day 5.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of like a survival of the fittest. Like if you get to day 3 and then day 4, day 5, it's like day 5 is meant to be the optimal time to freeze them, but there's arguments that could be 3. Like again, there's so much gray area. But so yeah, we currently have 5 embryos sitting there frozen. We were going to do our first transfer last week, but it fell on the same day as my brother's wedding. So we've kind of decided we kind of had to push that back. So we'll do our first transfer hopefully in about a week and a bit or about 10 days.
There's so many things I admire about you, but the fact that you're coming on here to talk about while you're in it, like you are so right in it at the moment. I think that's just so brave of you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And that is something that comes up a lot from messages from other people is that they appreciate that. And Belle talks a lot on her TikTok and she's probably even more open than I am with some of the stuff she talks about, which is really cool, and I admire Belle for that. But yeah, the fact that we're not kind of waiting to the end to then tell our story and whether it's successful or not. But I think that's really important, especially for men. Like I said, like I struggled to talk about it at all because I wanted some answers and wanted a bit more clarity on certain things. But I guess, that's just life. And I think the more we can speak about it in the moment, it's really valuable. So yeah, I find it, I'm very humbled that a lot of people sort of appreciate that.
It's so true. It is an incredibly vulnerable thing to do because most of the time, if not all of the time, I would say that when people come and talk to us here in a public way, they've gone through the thing and now they're able to talk about it in a reflective way because there's a safety in knowing that like they got through it. And they can kind of shape the story in a way that feels safe to them. But to be able to tell, and we've often asked people to come on, and then we realize actually they're right in the middle of something. It's just not the right time to talk about it. Totally understand, and I'm probably the same. I think I would find it much harder to talk about something in the middle of it before you've gotten through it. But it is quite astonishing. Now that I think about it from that point of view, that you would talk about it like this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, thank you. I think the more I speak about it, the more comfortable I actually feel doing it. So yeah, it's taken me a lot to get to this point, but I'm really glad that I am. And I hope that, people can sort of take something from it.
When you picture your future, if you let your mind wander 10, 15 years into the future, do you do you envisage, like, do you picture yourself with kids, or you don't allow yourself to go there, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely don't think about it too much. Obviously, our mind wanders and those thoughts do come up. I think when they did, any thought of having kids would actually make me really upset. Like when that thought came up, I was always attached to the idea that I might not have that at some point. But I'm also well aware that at some time in the future, I'm more than likely going to have kids. They just might potentially not be my kids. So that's another thing that comes with this
biologically,
journey.
do you mean?
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the next step, and I don't think about that at all. Like it comes up every now and then with Belle and I about, okay, so if these embryos don't work, then what? Do we then go to like a third specialist and try something again? Or was this kind of like, we're done with this? We do have the frozen sperm. So I think we'll be okay, but we'll just never really know. But the next step would be donor sperm. So we'll have Belle's eggs. We would just have to get donor sperm to then fertilize them. So they would be not my biological children, but yeah, it's something I don't really tend to get too much into, just because at this point we don't really quite need to, and I don't want to sort of waste too much time and energy on something that might not happen. But yeah, that's kind of what would be next. So
how do you feel when friends get pregnant? Like when, when friends say like, oh, great news, everyone. We just started trying and we're pregnant.
Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest parts, I think, especially for Belle. Like Belle struggles with that probably more than most other things. And because we're at that age now where a lot of our friends are either pregnant or have just had kids. So yeah, that's really hard. That's probably the biggest trigger for Belle and I. I think initially it was always like, oh, like when are you guys having kids? Or like, why don't you have kids? Like those sort of questions really triggering. But now they're a little bit more open and people understand what we're going through. We don't get that really at all now, which is great. But I love kids and I love my friends and my family. So I don't want to let what I'm going through impact the relationships I have with those people. But yeah, the pregnancy part of it is kind of hard because they're going through the process that we're trying to get to. It triggers Belle a lot. So if she sees it, say if we're at home and she sees a friend post something, because social media is everywhere, right? So you can't escape it. Yeah, she'll definitely have those moments, and I have those moments a lot. But I think just talking through them helps. And that's one thing I've learned is especially if Belle's having a real struggle with it, it's kind of just like, all right, like I'm going to lean into how you're feeling and just let you know that I'm feeling the exact same way. And it's really unfair. And so instead of, say, trying to fix the problem like a lot of males do when, their partners are struggling, it's like, oh, well, let's just do this or I'll help you with this. It's like, nah, like let's just sit in this together and just feel really shitty. Yeah. So that's been a really big learning for us. But yeah, it definitely doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't come across as an insensitive question, but I imagine that for a lot of couples who are trying to achieve something together, the concept of blame would be so toxic to a relationship. How do you navigate that and avoid falling into a blame game or a blame trap?
Yeah. I think it just comes back to the communication and just being really open with each other. One thing I've told Belle is it's whatever you're feeling or if something's triggered you, just tell me. Just tell me what it is. Just be really direct and open with it. Don't attack me about 10 other things I've done wrong. I didn't pick up the dog poo out the back and you yell at me for 3 hours. It's like, I know there's something else beneath the surface that you're struggling with. And if it is a bit of blame, I would rather you just express that to me. And then we can talk through it rather than you stewing on it. And
was that a fear for you? Or am I projecting?
No, definitely. No, early days for sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, early, it was probably more prominent early in the journey. And then as we've kind of just like got stuck into it together, I think it's kind of become a bit more of an afterthought. But yeah, I mean, I can't blame Annabelle for anything, but Belle, but from the other way, Belle, it has definitely come up. But
and not that I'm saying ever anyone should be. No, I'm just imagining that, especially when you're going through hormone treatment, that just completely, from what I understand and what you've said, completely messes with your ability to regulate. And have control over your faculties, I guess, and emotions and thinking. Yeah, it must be really difficult.
No, definitely. Yeah, I think the more we sort of spoke through it and were really open about it, the more it's helped. But I mean, we're still human, and we still have times where like we'll butt heads and argue about it and feel a bit shitty and not talk for a bit or whatever, and then we'll always work through it.
And you mentioned the analogy of her not getting angry for other things, just tell me what you're thinking. That must have been a real challenge for you to say what you're thinking.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely. I feel like a lot of the time, especially early, I would kind of park my stuff and just kind of bottle it up and not necessarily always express that to her. And I think that was, like I said, one of the challenges. Like when you're in it together and you're both struggling, it's really hard a lot of the time to express how you're actually feeling because it's affecting both of yous. And that's where talking out to others has been really helpful.
Yeah.
Because you can just chat with someone that's not actually living it and they can have a different perspective on something. And I've also learned that there's different people in your support networks that can help you in different ways. So you might have that friend that just goes, fuck, that sucks, mate. But, like, let's go grab a feed or whatever. But there might be a friend that's you can actually sit down and he'll work through it a little bit with you and ask you a bit more questions and probe and be a bit more curious. And I'm very fortunate enough that I feel like I've got, a nice range of friends and family that I can go to. Parents, Belle's family, they've been great for her and me as well. But I think it's really important to have those people in your support network.
I guess it would allow you to, if the only person you were speaking to was your partner, who you're going through it with, then you're going to misfire some days and put your stuff on them when they're not able to handle it that day and not be the support that they need. I imagine that having that network and a professional in there allows you to be the partner that they need you to be at some points as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think it's so imperative. And I think that's for any relationship really. Like obviously we're going through infertility challenges, but everyone's going through their own challenges in some way. So I think, working on your relationship's really, really important to be able to, get through whatever the hardship is. And, for a lot of people, if they don't, it can, cause some serious relationship issues or breakup. And, it's, and that's another thing, like I'm just so grateful for Belle that, she's come with me on this journey. Cause like I said, like early days, there was always this thought that, maybe she's just going to up and go and go find someone else. But it's the stuff we've gone through has been it's been hard, and I'm just forever grateful for Belle, definitely.
Can I just one last question to finish? I'm just interested to know how all encompassing this is. How often are you thinking about this? Is this on your mind 24/7? I imagine it would be close to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's all engulfing. I think like it is just, it completely consumes every aspect of your life. Obviously emotionally, it takes pretty much all of your time and energy. And then, physically, like with the operations that I've had and the injections, like that's been, pretty traumatic. Financially, it's kind of saying that you have to really obviously commit a lot of your finances to. And I think even socially, it's really consuming. It's probably one part that people probably wouldn't quite think about or realize. But I mean, the instances that stick out the most are like while I was going through my injections, I would always do them after dinner just because you had to do them at a regular time every night. So if I wanted to go have dinner with friends, like say grab a few mates, go have a beer at the pub, I'd go have dinner. I would actually then sneak off to the car. I'd have to bring the injection in a cooler bag in the car. So I would sneak off to the car, inject, and then come back. And that was kind of through the time where I wasn't really I hadn't been talking to my friends about it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And when you say you had those side effects, I've never really asked these questions, but is it like a general sort of feeling of crapness the whole time? Or is it like once you inject, you get a wave of nausea and mood like swings and stuff? Or?
Yeah, it comes on pretty quickly, like the nausea stuff. You get a bit irritable. Like the mood swings are probably more a little bit dependent on like where you're at and what you're doing. But yeah, the irritability and the nausea kick in pretty quickly. So that was the thing. So I was going back, say, to have dinner and acting like I'm normal and it's the same, but I'm actually feeling like really shit. And then it's like, oh, I might maybe just shoot off
and trying to hide it.
Or some nights you just don't go. Like, so you end up just actually removing yourself from a lot of social stuff, which, yeah, for me, one of my values is connected. Like I put a premium on making sure that I'm connected with people around me and especially friends and family. So, yeah, that's an aspect of it that was, like really tough. So, yeah, this journey definitely it takes every bit of, everything you think is your normal life and it kind of flips it on its head a little bit, kind of back to the card. So, yeah, and again, like it's only kind of as I've reflected back on a lot of this stuff that I've realized, every single moment and how much it actually has affected us.
That must be so hard for people, for everyone who's going through IVF or if you're trying to hide, like for men, a lot of men who would be trying to hide it, that you're going through something that you felt a level of shame over. So that shame is kind of isolating, but then you're doing an activity that draws you further isolating out of social contact. It's like a compounding issue. I can imagine people getting into a very dangerous place of isolation and depression throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. I think I was very fortunate because I did have a lot of support networks and family and friends already around. And through work, I'm around people a lot. And I'm doing something that I love and I've got a lot of great people around me. So that was really amazing. I think Belle definitely experienced an element of that. Belle works from home. So that was one thing that she really struggled with because she was already isolated through work. And then because she is someone that kind of likes to be really informed, she'd be sitting on her computer like for hours trying to research stuff. And the early parts of that were really hard. And then Belle's kind of now built a bit of like an online community through her social media channels and she talks a lot to people and it's been amazing for her. And that was probably the one thing I struggled with is I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I had this real sense that like I'm kind of like going through this real hard journey on my own in the sense that I don't know anyone else that's experienced the same thing. So yeah, I think it's a really important message, like just to let males going through this that they're not alone in their challenges, even if they haven't got anyone nearby or they haven't heard of anyone that is going through the same struggle. There definitely are. There's probably a lot more than people would ever imagine. So, it was definitely something tough, but I think speaking out's been, amazing for me and I hope amazing for a lot of other men.
I don't know where I got this from, but because like it might sound counterintuitive to people that know me and people that listen to this show, but there's definitely an inbuilt thing in me of like, as a man, inverted commas, I should be able to take on a certain amount of shit and just like kind of swallow it. And that's part of being an adult male. But it really is, I mean, I'm sure that's just wrong. I mean, there's part of me that feels like there is a certain amount of being an adult in general that you have to take on unpleasant stuff and be able to sit with it. But there's, it just seems so dangerous because there's a point where it reaches a threshold that you can't take it on, but you don't know where that is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that just comes back to making sure you've got the right support networks around you. And for a lot of men, it's the easy option is to just bottle it up and soldier on. And then you've got all these like unexpressed emotions and feelings that have to come out somewhere. And then, that obviously leads people to do things that they probably shouldn't be, in terms of alcoholism or gambling or, cheating on their partners, whatever it is. I hate to think that stuff, but they're the bad things that's where they have to express themselves. Whereas if you've got those really important support networks around you and you can talk through things, it's easily the best thing.
Absolutely. Well done for doing it.
Just on Belle, you've mentioned her a few times and people following her on TikTok who obviously get a lot of solace from following her. How do people, I don't understand TikTok, how would people find her to follow her if they'd like to follow the journey?
I think it's just Annabelle and Reece would kind of be like her TikTok name. I'm not actually on TikTok, but Belle is.
Sounds like
Annabelle and Reece.
Sounds like you are.
It's like Annabelle bracket and a little bit of Reece is what it should be.
So I think a lot of people would love to follow the journey. So we'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes.
You'll handle that, Hugh?
I will find the TikTok and stick it in there.
Yep.
Wow. I'll put it in the show notes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Beautiful. Reece,
Yeah.
it's it's incredible that you come on and talk about it. And I just know that if I was going through anything similar to what you're going through, it would be so nice to hear this. Like it would be just so helpful. So yeah, thank you on behalf of everyone who is no doubt being helped.
Yeah. No, thank you. Honestly, thank you for having me on the podcast, because I was telling Bridget when I caught up with her last week that, this podcast actually helped me be more vulnerable and be more open, and to hear a lot of people go through different hardships has been amazing for me. So thank you to you guys for setting this platform up for a lot of people.
That's a pleasure. Good luck to you and Belle. We're all rooting for you, which in the context of this episode sounds like a strange, inappropriate turn of phrase, but
I was expecting that one from Ryan.
No, I would have been intentional with it. Hugh tends to say that stuff more accidentally.
We're wishing you all the best in your journey, and thank you for being so vulnerable with us today, Reece.
No, thank you. My pleasure.